All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 349 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill. Today we have St. Louis Kiss Lonnie. We've got... Well, actually, he's not here yet. We might have... the voice of reason. We're going to need him, I think, later on in the episode, at least, to talk us down. But until then, you'll have Marcus Almighty. Mark.
Greetings.
All right, so welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us. This episode is not going to be like the last few. We're going back into the what-if land. And one of the things that really does come up is we're going to set the stage here. We're going to say, what would happen if Kiss finished their revenge tour in 1992? They still did Alive III and Kiss My Ass, but they also continued working on Cause at that time, Carnival of Souls, as the album became. But instead of touring Japan and Australia in 1995 as an extension of the revenge tour, that was instead a start of the Tournament of Souls worldwide tour for Carnival of Souls. So let's say they had just released Carnival of Souls in sequence. It had come out. What sort of songs do we think that they would have pulled from the album to perform live? And then how would they have changed the set list, which had been in kind of a set of, or a sort of evolution over the previous decade, reaching a high point on Lonnie's favorite tour? What would have happened with Carnival of Souls? So, Lonnie, let's start with you. And, what 5 songs from the album do you think that they would have had the guts to present to the audience? And what are your feelings, I guess, overall of how that album would have translated live?
Well, I thought about, this isn't like a new question to me. It's something that I think we thought about for a long time. Excuse me. Like, what songs on that album would they play? And I think, it goes back to even when we started getting our bootlegs of Carnival of Souls, thinking like, what would be a single? What would they play on a tour? So the 5 I came up with and we chose 5 because they played 5 songs from Revenge on the Revenge tour. So the 5 I came up with were Hate, Master and Slave, Rain, Jungle, and I Confess. And I don't know if a lot of the other songs on the album would really translate well in a live setting. I think our lists, are pretty close to one another, but I really don't know what other songs would really translate live. I mean, I can't see them doing Seduction of the Innocent live in a electric arena type setting. I just don't think it would work. I don't think I Will Be There really would work. So I went with more of some heavier type songs that I think would have blended into a set list a lot easier.
Yeah, nice. I think you hit the nail on the head that the album, at least in terms of a Kiss concert, is very challenging to think of how those songs would be presented live versus, say, how Revenge was as an album. You can hear a lot of those songs that weren't performed live easily slipping into the live
Correct.
set had they had the interest or the opportunity to do so. With Carnival of Souls, we have had Bruce do quite a bit of the material over the years. Union and Live in the Galaxy gives us Jungle. I was on the cruise when they did the medley of Carnival of Souls songs. He's done stuff down in Australia with was that ESP down there that did some...
I think so.
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but there have been plenty of opportunities over the year to at least hear Bruce's bands do a live interpretation, and it's still hard to get a feel for how that material would sound if Kiss were doing it. So, Mark, what about you? What were the 5 songs, and what are your thoughts about the album being presented live at all?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I'm very fascinated by this conversation because when I listened to it, the first thing that came to mind to me, and I mean, I don't know, you guys can say I'm totally wrong with this, but I kind of thought that this record wasn't really too, different from Revenge, in the sense that a lot of it was really heavy stuff. It was stuff that was really kind of trying to follow the current trend at that time period, and I mean, a lot of the stuff was really heavy stuff like Hate, like Master and Slave and stuff like that was, heavy guitars, and stuff like that. I mean, there's no like keyboard soaked things, like things that you can't imagine, Kiss doing in a live stage setting. So the songs I picked were Hate, I picked Jungle, I picked Master and Slave, I picked I Confess, and the oddball pick, which nobody picked, but I can totally see Gene kind of saying, come on, it'll turn out great. Trust me, guys, let's do it, is Childhood's End. Now, because when I think the problem with that song is that when people imagine that, they think right away it's some kind of like, guitar up to here ballad that and it's not that. It's really starts off like a pretty rocking intro, that whole beginning into it. It's just when he gets into the verses, it drops down into a kind of a semi-clean electric guitar, and he just sings over. I mean, to me, it just doesn't seem like anything that out of the ordinary, as far as like a live capacity. Like when I think of these songs, none of these songs I sit there and go, I can't imagine them playing this live. I can imagine them all doing. All it is guitars, bass, and drums. There's nothing in it that makes it unbelievable to play live. Sure, maybe some of the guitars are more affected. There's some, some weirder effects on the guitars than maybe prior albums. But I mean, those guys had full, rack unit gear, and they had everything. They could have recreated those sounds, no problem, for a live show.
Yeah, so you raise an interesting point, and I liked your pick of Childhood's End. I just see the band talking about, planning the set, going, oh, let's try this one. No, the audience is going to go to sleep during that, because the tempos are slow, and where the tempos aren't slow, the melodies are slow, because it is a very down-tuned album, both in terms of its content, its topical matter, and then, of course, the tunings and the performance. So it's very difficult to think of how a Kiss concert, which is a celebration, kind of an upbeat, there are a few ebbs and flows in there, but they're also very predictable in some ways. How do you kind of shoehorn some of the songs off this album in order to have 5 in the set? And as we find, when we combined all our prospective set lists into one, and then did the math of how many of each song, we lost songs at the end. There weren't going to be 5 Carnival of Soul songs in our combined set list, just because there wasn't enough agreement across all the panelists. Ken chose some interesting picks, and he did have Seduction of the Innocent. And that kind of the riff at the beginning is almost like a bass played as a chord, isn't it? It's noted, it's fretted, and then it's chord to get the effect of it. And I don't know whether that is the case, but that's what it sounds like, just thinking off the top of my head. He also had In the Mirror, which I thought was a very good pick, because I also had that. Jungle and Hate. So, I mean, right off the bat, we've got, unanimous agreement in Hate and Jungle, because I had both of those. I had Master and Slave, I Confess as well. So three of us had I Confess, 2 of us had In the Mirror, 3 of us had Master and Slave, and 4 of us had Jungle and Hate. So across kind of the discussion, I think we've got a good mix of songs overall to fit into the set. I guess the biggest question that then comes down to a Carnival of Souls tour list is Kiss had started out Revenge with a 25-song set list, and that was massive. I mean, that really was the heyday. I think they may have done a couple of longer ones in Australia in '95, maybe Japan. But certainly in terms of making fans happy, they hit the nail on the head as well. So while they had, cut a few songs, I think they cut 3 during the Revenge tour, and we're down to 22 at the end. We're going to start our Carnival of Souls tour with 25 songs. But the most important question is opener and the opening song sequence. What were the things that you would think would be important to the Kiss opening set at this stage? They've been doing the same thing for a few years. Would you change it? How did you think about it? And what would you like for, say, your first 3 songs in order to open that show in the way a Kiss show has to be opened? Lonnie.
Well, a Kiss show has to open with bombastic energy. That is a must. It's something that the audience is looking for when they go see the band, even during this era without the makeup. And at the same time, they never, if you look at the touring history, they never opened the tour, back-to-back tours with the same song twice. Because I think the audience is going to go, well, didn't I see this? The first thing you think of, well, wait, this is what they opened with 2 years ago and I saw them. Is this going to be the same show I just saw 2 years ago? Because you look at Revenge, they opened with Creatures, and you look at Hot in the Shade, they opened with I Stole Your Love. So as much as I love Creatures as the opening song, I couldn't pick Creatures to be the opening song for this set list. So I had to switch it up a little bit. And I didn't want to make it I Stole Your Love either. So I'm thinking, well, what hadn't they done to open up a set in a while? And that was Detroit Rock City, which is a great opener. And I almost went with Deuce for them to open, but I went Detroit Rock City instead. I almost made it Deuce, but it's like, Detroit Rock City is such a fun opener. And, even the most casual Kiss fan there knows Detroit Rock City. So I went Detroit Rock City and then Creatures and then Deuce as just like a 1, 2, 3 punch to open up the show. Kind of like what they did later on. I mean, it's 3 songs that they have previously opened shows with, and that's kind of like what they did in Vegas when they went Detroit Rock City, Creatures, Deuce. I think maybe in that order even. Just almost, and I didn't even realize I did that until right now while I'm talking about it. So that was my pick. I wanted to do something different, but I wanted to keep the energy high to open up a Kiss show.
Nice, which is exactly what you have to have when they drop the curtain. Mark, what are your thoughts on the opening sequence and specifically the opening song?
Well, I mean, Lonnie brought up an interesting point about not opening with the same song, twice, back to back on tours. But I kind of looked at it this way. The Revenge tour was short. I mean, they literally had to cancel it because it was just dreadfully attended. So I'm assuming that this time around that maybe something happened. Maybe they were able to do a much longer tour. Maybe they'll play smaller places, whatever. They were able to do a longer thing. So to me, that theory about the opening with another song, I didn't really use that in that sense, because I just thought to myself, what, not many people saw the Revenge tour, so why not just open with Creatures? Because Creatures is such a great opening song. It is a bombastic opener. The way I kind of looked at it was that the first 3 songs are critical. Having written many set lists myself in my own band stuff, those 3 songs, you either grab the audience and you have them for the rest of the night, or if you botch those 3 and you don't connect with them, you have a hell of an uphill ski ride to get them back on with you. So what I did was just put in Creatures first and then come back with a song that they probably would have never expected to do next, but a classic like Parasite. So I was like, they'd be like, whoa, what the hell? Paris? I haven't heard that in a long time or whatever. And then to put that in there next. And then of course, Deuce being a very popular song early in the set, I put that in as third. So a back-to-back-to-back assault on the senses, because, on one hand, those people who are the classic fans will be excited. The people who are casual fans will be probably hyped up from the energy of the songs. And you got to remember too, there's going to be some people in there that are going to be kind of scratching their heads with the newer stuff, right? So you have to kind of pace this set so that, if you're going to put in a new song, make sure that something that's around it is something that they're going to remember, to kind of overlook that maybe they heard a song they didn't want to exactly hear.
Nice. I mean, I love both of your guys' sequences, and Ken had a really good one as well. He starts us off with I Stole Your Love. Yeah, so going back to, Hot in the Shade, isn't it? Yeah. So, followed by Deuce, and then In the Mirror. So he lines it up with 2 classics, which should have people really happy, obviously, I Stole Your Love, and then into a new song. I took a different point of view. I immediately had images of they've knocked the spikes off Lady Liberty's head, and they're going to recycle that because things are starting to pick back up in the industry, but they're not sure. So they've trashed Lady Liberty, and they've given her a latex mask for Zipperhead is going to be the main stage thing. And I think they're going to open up the set with the scratching that you hear at the beginning, the distorted intro, Paul on the mic, hey, ladies and gentlemen, going into that while Bruce is doing his, guitar work, and they're going to rip into Hate as the opening. Straight out, they're throwing down the gauntlet. Gene finally gets an opening to the set because, they got to give the guy a bone for Unholy. And that wouldn't make a good opener. And then they go into Creatures of the Night and Deuce. So it's a power punch in that sense that I want them opening with something new because they haven't done that in a bit. And I also like how that intro does work for the album, and I think it gives some good dynamics that could get the audience going, WTF, we're getting a new song, which many of them won't have heard at that point, and then you go back into the comfort zone of Creatures and Deuce. All right, let's move on. Classics returning and classics replaced. That plays a very important in both of your sets and mine as well, because one of the things that they had done in Hot in the Shade and for Revenge was bring back a lot of classics. How important would that be, I think, at this stage to you, with what they had done on previous tours into what they'd be doing now with a vastly different album? Do you think the classics become more important, and which are the classics in your set that you think are critical for them to be playing? Lonnie?
I think the classics are critical at this point, and they had become critical since they brought them back in Hot in the Shade. That the Kiss audience is going to be expecting to hear them at this point after they had been missing for so many years in the 80s. I think Firehouse has to be in there because the fire breathing is still an element, and they hadn't graduated to the point of, hey, we can breathe fire during a different song other than Firehouse yet. They hadn't gotten to that point yet, to the point that they didn't even try that until really War Machine and Rock the Nation. That was almost, if we're talking 95 that they're touring for this, that was still 9 years away before they even graduated to that, hey, we could do fire breathing for a different song. So I think Firehouse has to be in there. And it's a Kiss show. The anthems have to be in there. Shout It Out Loud and Rock and Roll Night have to be in there. And I think Black Diamond would be, I put Black Diamond in my set list. I think they would let Eric Singer sing Black Diamond at this point. He had a full tour with them. They obviously, Eric Carr had sung it in the 80s. I think they would be ready to have Eric go ahead and sing Black Diamond to maybe end the set is how I shape my set list. So and I put Hotter Than Hell in there too. I think it sounded great when they did it in Revenge, and I think it would deserve to remain in the set as well.
Sorry, fumbling for my mute button. It's like I'm on a Zoom meeting.
Oh, and watching you. I love watching you in there too, just because it sounded so good on Revenge that I don't think they would have dropped it. I think they would have left it in because watching you sounded so good in Revenge, and they kept it on the reunion tour in '96. So why wouldn't they have played it in '95?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and it's
There
Ken.
it is.
Hey Ken,
Hey.
so we've read your intros, about the 5 songs that you would have picked. We've done your first 3 songs of the set, and now we're talking about the Kiss classics and the importance of them in the set, following on from the themes of the previous 2 tours. So I'm going to go to Mark while you catch up and see where we are in the flow of things. Mark.
Yeah, so, well, I have to agree with Lonnie. I think the classics are vitally important in the set list right now, especially since, you're going to be doing a tour on a record that who knows how well it did. I mean, look what happened in Revenge. They were 100% confident in that album, but the tour just didn't pan out with how they thought it did. So the classics are going to be just as important now as they were probably back in that day. But the thing that I think that's important to make a note of as well, because Lonnie brought up a lot of great songs that I picked as well, like Black Diamond, and and songs like Watching You is a great classic song. I mean, I even picked songs like Cold Gin, and I picked Strutter as well in my set list. But what I think is important to mention too is that they need to put in classics that are considered classics by the general public. Heaven's on Fire, songs like that. Songs that people will know from the general public, because whether we want to admit it or not, while we think Cold Gin is a stone cold classic, to Joe Blow, who's never had a Kiss record, he'll probably never have heard Cold Gin, but he might have heard Heaven's on Fire, right? So you have to put in songs like that. You have to put in songs like I Was Made for Loving You. You have to put in songs like Tears Are Falling in there, because those are the songs that were played on video, on MTV and Much Music and stuff like that. So I think those songs were just as important to include into the set list as well, because they were the ones that were being spun a lot. Lick It Up, as much as we're so sick and tired of them playing that song, then in a sense they have to play that because those guys would know it, the people would know it. As much as I love songs like, like let's even pick like Deuce, for example. We think Deuce is the greatest song since Sliced Bread, but what do you think the general guy might know, Lick It Up or Deuce? Right? He'll know Lick It Up before he knows Deuce, most likely, right? So I just think that that's the importance of those songs in there. Like, I mean, I put in Let Me Go Rock and Roll because I think that's one of their greatest live songs that they do in concert. But, really, how many people that are not diehard fans wouldn't be that familiar with that song? That's just a kind of the way I looked at it, how I paced out the assignment of the songs within the set list.
Yeah, so for me, classics by that point had become critical because they knew they weren't competing just in terms of new music, and I think they embraced that. So I kept, stuff like Deuce, Firehouse stayed in mind, Watching You stayed in mind. I brought Hard Luck Woman back in because of Kiss My Ass. I figure a lot of people will have gotten, reminded of that song due to Garth Brooks, and they would have jumped on that to play in concert, in my delusional mind. So don't knock me down, man. Let Me Go Rock and Roll was in there again, as well as a classic. And I had I Stole Your Love as well, which Ken put in the opener, but I had it down in the encores, which I don't know how well it works because it really is more of an opening type song. And I think the weirdest one I put back in was I Was Made for Loving You. I think they would have embraced that as well, like they had, a few years earlier, and just be doing it because it's something everyone recognizes. Ken, the importance of classics. And you're
muted.
As you know, I'm muted. So, yeah, the classics. Obviously, that's always been in, the Kiss set list is the classics, and we get the same things, and we complain about it all the time, and so that sort of thing. So you need those ones that stand out. And yes, I did put like Julian said, I put I Stole Your Love also, and I did add I Was Made for Loving You, just like Julian, and they had that on the Alive 3 CD and that sort of thing. So yeah, you kind of had to put it there. I wasn't going to put it there. That was a late ad for me. But other ones like the 80s stuff, Heaven's on Fire, Tears Are Falling, things that you have to really put there, because it was 80s. It was just not many years before this. So, and then I put in stuff like, I don't know if any of you did, but I put Black Diamond.
I did.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic that I think needed to be put back in the set list at that time. Yeah, we have Rock and Roll Night and some other songs, but that one really is, well, it's always been one of my favorite songs, but I think needed to be there. Yeah, I Want You and stuff like that. Those are classics that a lot of people aren't going to know, I guess. They're not a hit, and they don't play every tour, but they're ones that I think would get people going, even if they've never heard it before live. Stuff like that. So, yeah, Calling Dr. Love is another one I brought back too.
That was a good pick, by the way, Calling Dr. Love. That one just jumped out at me. And you all had Black Diamond except for me. So,
Hater.
yeah. And Mr. Gill went with Hard Luck
Has to be
Woman
different.
instead of Black Diamond, as usual.
Yes.
King Contrary Man. All right. Yeah, but I was made for loving it, and I just thought my reasoning behind that was because of Alive 3. Went with that from Alive 3 because it wasn't really on the tour, and the Kiss My Ass song. So let's move on into next question. How much of Carnival of Souls do you actually think would have been realistic in this set? We've gone through all of our songs we've that we pick from the album, but do you think they really would have done 5 new songs from Carnival of Souls on this tour? By the time we do our combined set list, it drops to 4. Surprising, and we had to do it. We had to do a tie break to get that 4th song in there, so it was really 3. How many of these songs do you think are actually realistic when we're talking about 1995? So grunge is starting its wane. It's dropped off in popularity rapidly from we're in utero now, and Pearl Jam's becoming massive. Lonnie.
It's difficult to say because they did do 5 songs off of Revenge, but I could see them maybe starting off the tour with 5, maybe 4, and then dropping one. I like your idea, Julian, of them starting with Hate, and I considered that for my set list as well. I don't see Hate going anywhere, and I don't see Jungle going anywhere. And I don't see Master and Slave going anywhere. I see those 3 as being maybe they're maybe the singles off the album, had the album had a proper release and promotion. And I see maybe some of the others, like I think a lot of us chose I Confess, and I also chose Rain. And I see some of them maybe dropping out, but I see those 3 remaining. I see them maybe starting with 5, maybe going down to 4, and maybe settling on 3. Just because, I mean, even think about Psycho Circus in '98. Well, they only played 3 songs off of that when they went out and toured. So I see them maybe starting with 5 and waning down to 3 and relying on those classics on this tour.
I disagree with you vehemently about Psycho Circus. I think the classics, and because it was reunion lineup, meant there was no way in hell that they were going to get more than 3 in there because of dropping classics with the with the original guys. Just imagine if they had tried, and then think of how badly they did when they did eventually do Pledge Allegiance to the flag. So, Mark.
Well, I honestly think that there was no way in hell they would do that many songs live. I mean, the thing is, I remember going to a lot of concerts between 1990 and let's say 1997. And a lot of bands that I went to see, especially at that time, were playing 1, maybe 2 songs off of their new records and then just completely relying on the safety blanket that is their back catalog of classics. AC/DC was doing that. Motley Crue did that a lot. Lots of bands were doing that. The only band I can think off the top of my head that consistently plays more than 4 new songs off of each of their new records when they toured was Rush. Every single time I've seen them, the record that they were touring, they always played at least 5 songs off the new record. I mean, when I saw them for Power Windows, they almost played the whole album. Like they when they say they back a new record, they back a new record. Other bands I found were not into doing that. I mean, in more recent years, Iron Maiden did the mistake of playing the whole record. I think it was a Matter of Life and Death or something like that. They played the whole thing that completely bored the hell out of their audience. But that's because they played the whole thing in one shot. They didn't mix it up. But I agree with Lonnie. I think Hate and Jungle would be the 2 that would be played and that would be throughout the entire tour. I think they're the strongest songs that would probably be, adapted for live purpose. But the rest of them, I just don't think that they would have, for lack of a better term, I don't think they would have the balls to play some of those other songs live when they know they can pull out other songs like Watching You, or they can pull out something else like Heaven's on Fire instead. What would you do if you were Gene? play I Confess or Put Heavens on Fire? I think that the answer is right in front of your nose, pretty much. So I think that they would probably stick with 2 songs the most and just rely on their classics to, keep the audience happy, and to have good reviews, and to have like a review where the people are saying the audience was really loud and on fire, and that would generate people going to more shows on the tour.
Yeah. It may well be. I think what it's interesting to note is that on the Revenge tour, they started off the tour with 5 songs from the Revenge album, and they ended the tour with 5 songs from the Revenge album. So they were really damn good songs, so kind of hard for them to cut those. Ken, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you said they did I Pledge Allegiance to the Flag. Is that a new song they did?
Did I say that?
You said to the flag. Yeah.
I deny it. I can edit that out.
No. Okay. I know what you meant. So the songs...
Well, they did do the Pledge Allegiance eventually, but they... Pledge Allegiance to the
later.
state of rock and roll. So there we go.
No, that was the other one. Anyway, songs. Yeah, I don't think they'd be lucky to have one actually stay on the set. I would think 2 at the most would stay, like Hate and in the Mirror. I don't think Jungle. And Jungle, if they did Jungle, they would have to trim it down. They're not going to do the full thing. They really need to. It's going to cut into their set list if they play the real long, the full thing. It's going to be worth 2 songs rather than 1, as far as time slots. So that would last a little while. But yeah, even if they did play it, I think it would be short. Again, it would be a shortened version of Jungle. So yeah, Hate and In the Mirror. I threw on Seduction in the Innocent just because I know they would never put that in there, but just because I like it, I put it in there. Hey,
just because you wouldn't pick 5 songs anyway, you put
just
it on.
want to do that. And then as far as the Mark's comment about the Rush, I know he'd bring up Rush, of course, but.
Everything goes back to Rush.
Everyone goes back. But I guess I think maybe the 2112 tour, they probably did, 2 songs from 2112? One is 2112.
No, they did the whole thing.
2112. I know. It counts
okay.
Counts as 1. You're right.
Yeah.
I know. I'm being...
obtuse.
There you go. Obtuse.
The voice of reason.
Just to give you a bad time. But yeah, that's a long song. Actually, I think they did probably a couple other ones off the second side of that album. So that's a lot of music to do on one show from one album. Otherwise, yeah, it'd be lucky, like I said at the beginning, to have only 1 song to survive, I think, in this group, if they did a tour, versus like Revenge, where you said they had 5 lasted till the end.
Yeah, so I agree. I think Ken raised some very good points about shortening some of these in terms of their arrangements, and that was what my notes are on the 5. How many of these would survive? Well, Jungle, I would actually pay money to see Gene Simmons play that Deep Purple riff on the bass, but I think he would.
That's where Ken was going to go.
I think he would work it into. You remember the solo from the mid '80s that he was doing on the bass? Just that very. I think he would use that as the bass solo as opening into Jungle, and then he would do his adaptation of Bruce Kulick's bass line, but it would be rearranged into like a 4-minute version, then leading into Eric's drum solo. So no harmonica this tour. Hate. And, I've already covered that one. I think that would stay in the opening slot. And I think it would have been a 3rd single from the album. Because I do think the singles would have followed the same flow that they did when eventually released. That Jungle would have been the 1st single, Paul Stanley song, followed by Master and Slave as the most up-tempo from the album. And then followed by Hate, which, back in 1997, there was talk about it being on Spawn soundtrack. So I think they would have actually found a placement for the song back then, because they would have been more desperate. They would have done anything. Mid-90s. Master and Slave, I think, would stay in the set as an up-tempo. In the Mirror would get dropped, or if it even got played. I Confess, I think they would have to rearrange that into a shorter version because it just goes on too long. I think they would be trying to get across the songs in shorter forms because they wouldn't want to infringe upon the time to perform classics, but they'd want to advertise enough of it to hopefully whet someone's appetite. Would they end the tour with 5 songs? No. I totally agree. 2 if we were lucky, 1 more likely, just because I think at that point the reaction to the album would have been not that much different than it was in 1997, 98. You know, the Jungle did well in mainstream rock, Master and Slave declined, and then people lost interest, and Kiss fans as well. This doesn't exclude the fact that we had it for quite a while before it came out because of the bootlegs. So I think it would have held the fans' interest longer, but I think the reaction to such a change would have been that the fans want to hear classics and or at least, you know, put some more of Revenge back in, please. Just to make Lonnie happy. All right, next question I've already started to touch on is the solo spots and features in the set. You know, where do you think those would fall on a Carnival of Souls tour, and do you imagine anything that different? Mark, let's start with you on that.
Yeah, I think that they would still obviously be doing these kind of features, I think. I mean, you know, they were very popular back in the day, and they still did some of them during the 80s as well. I mean, you referenced the infamous Gene Simmons bass solo that was done. Yeah, that was an interesting segment of the show back then. But I don't know. I kind of see them doing some of the more popular ones. I mean, I don't think Gene would do a full out bass solo like that because while it was okay, it was not exactly his strong suit. I think he's more of an entertainer, less of a sort of solo player. He's not Billy Sheehan, let's just put it that way, right? So I think that he would still do, though, the Fire segment. And on my set list, I put it in I Love It Loud, which is interesting that Lonnie mentioned the fact that they never changed the position of the fire breathing until, like, what was he say, 2004, I think he said, right? I didn't really think about that part of it. I just thought of, you know, what would they do if they were to do it in a different sort of set list configuration. So, but that's a good point. If I would have thought of that, I maybe would have put in Firehouse because of that. So good point, Lonnie. But I put that Paul would do his usual kind of guitar introduction thing for Black Diamond. I always thought that used to work pretty good with his whole, yeah, you know, comes out and does the whole cutting of the audience and does the, you know, who's louder bit, right? And then does that, yeah, exactly. And then does the little introduction of Black Diamond. I think that always seems to work well for him rather than to try to attempt to be some sort of fantastic guitar player kind of approach, right? I didn't put any sort of individual spot for Bruce Kulick because I kind of think that they would have thought at this point to, rather than give him 4 or 5 minutes to do a full out guitar solo, we could put another classic song in there. So I think that while Bruce might not have been happy with that decision, I still think that they would have probably did it at that point. Who knows? Maybe if the tour would have started catching a lot of steam and would have been picking up pace and the audiences would have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, maybe they would have had a reason to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, let's give Bruce a segment here and that's it. And also don't forget, 25 songs, maybe it might be a good idea to give him a segment as well to give those guys a break vocally, right? So, but I didn't give one in there, so I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, let's see what Ken says.
Well, I do agree that the Paul Stanley part would be the good lead into Black Diamond, as it always has been. Yeah, the solo, Bruce solo, yeah, I think they could still have something there, and I don't know, be a part of. I don't know where I'd put it. Maybe somewhere around, I don't know if it's somewhere around Jungle or somewhere like that. And then the Gene breathing fire, yeah, that can go so many places. I guess, you know, I could stick it with War Machine, end of War Machine, that's fine. It works. Do we have Firehouse in here? I don't know. I don't think we do. Do we? Well, they could do it like they used to with Firehouse. So if that's on the set, then you can do it then like the good old days, right? And then for drum solo, yeah, and not a super long, crazy drum solo, but you can stick it somewhere in there. I don't know where. Maybe Before I Want You or something like that. I don't know. It can go anywhere.
Well, it depends at what point in the set you want to go to the restroom.
Yeah. Well, I usually don't walk out on the Kiss in the middle of a Kiss show, so I'd be there. Yeah, but a lot of this stuff is here or there, as far as where you're gonna put the little solo spots, and it's fine to have it in there wherever.
Yeah, so I've covered Gene, that he would do his bass solo as the intro to Jungle. And then Eric's solo would follow after, because that's pretty bass and drum heavy, that song. So it kind of lends itself to feeding both of those solo spots. Paul, I haven't given a lot of thought to, but looking at my set list, I go from, at the end of the main part of the set, it concludes with I kept the Rock and Roll All Night, followed by 800 encores for how I structured mine. I figured they'd give that one more ride. So I went from Rock and Roll All Night to Take It Off to Lick It Up to I Love It Loud. And then I Was Made for Loving You. I think he's going to do his solo because, of course, I didn't pick Black Diamond, did I? So I don't have that. So now I have to be creative. So he's going to do his solo as the intro to I Was Made for Loving You. And then Bruce, you know what? I don't think Bruce does a solo spot because he's playing so much frickin' guitar throughout this whole set that when he gets a chance to have a break while the other guys are goofing off, his fingers are being dipped in ice-cold water to wash the blood off to prepare for the next fretboard attack. So I don't think he needs a solo with all the stuff he gets to solo on. I don't think he needs an extended one to shoot rockets or anything because he's Bruce and he's busy. All right. Let's move on from there. By 1995, Kiss were doing some pretty kick-ass sets anyway, and this is going back into real history rather than our revisionist fantasy here. Do you think that would have been the same if the Carnival of Souls album was in the mix? Do you think these shows would have been as kick-ass as, say, Budokan 1995 or some of the Australian 1995 shows or South America 1994 if they were now stopping to play Jungle? Lonnie?
Oh, I think they would be just as kick-ass because this lineup had really hit its stride. I think these shows would be as good, if not better, than those 95 shows, because I think they would have obviously they rehearsed to go on those little tours that they did, but I think they would have been even more rehearsed because they would have been working through the kinks of adding in new songs. I think they would have been even tighter, if that's even possible, than what they sound on those shows. I think they would have. I love those shows. Much as I like Revenge Tour, I really like those 94, 95 shows. They're some of my favorites. And I think they would have been even tighter had they worked in some of these Carnival of Souls albums. I think it's a shame that it didn't happen the more you think about it. And speaking of which, I'm looking at my set list I sent you, and it is a mess. You can tell I did it while I was at work. I got shouted out loud in there twice. I skipped number 18. It is a disaster.
Let's do that again. Let's do the shout out loud again. One more time.
Lonnie, it's okay. Thanks for being here.
I'm embarrassed.
That's okay. I didn't pick Black Diamond. Mark!
Yeah, I have to agree with Lonnie, actually. I think that they would have been just as hard-hitting and impactful. I mean, don't forget, too, they were, like Lonnie said, they were very tight as a unit. The addition of Eric Singer in the band really made this band a force to be reckoned with live. I really think that it would have been just as powerful, even more powerful, with the addition of these songs, because they probably would have worked out a really good way to incorporate them into the set list, as far as maybe transitions and stuff like that, or where they would have been in, what kind of cool introduction they could have came up with for some of them. But I think that this was the band at one of its strongest. I mean, I'll never forget the time when I was at one of our band rehearsals back in the day, and they had just announced on the Grammys that Kiss were coming back, when they did that big announcement that, Kiss is back and the original members. My drummer at the time, it was like he told him that his cat got run over by a car. He was so disappointed. He was like, oh no. He was so pissed off because he loved Eric Singer and he thought that he was the best thing that happened to Kiss. He wasn't a big Kiss guy, but as soon as Eric came in, he was loving Kiss because of the way he drummed. And he goes, this is going to be terrible. He goes, Peter Criss can't drum anything like this guy. And he just thought it was going to be a disaster going back to those guys. And, while the reunion tour was pretty good and he didn't mind it either, I mean, he was proven right eventually that it was just not the same as listening to those guys like they were on Revenge. Because, I mean, even that Revenge show on Kissology is just fantastic. I mean, that performance is like spotless, And, once again, it's all about what's more important at that time. Is it money and the longevity of the band or musical, satisfaction? So I think that, at that time they had to do something to survive, but I love that lineup. And I think that if they would have continued down that path, yeah, maybe they wouldn't have been playing big shows like, Tiger Stadium or anything like that. But I think that they would have did some fantastic shows, tight shows, and shows that a lot of bands who stuck with the band would have loved, Like, I mean, even Daniel, I'm sure, would have agreed that he would have loved to have seen that lineup on that tour.
How many stadiums did they do in America after Tiger?
One.
Yeah.
Well, they played the Sky Dome, which is a pretty big,
In
big
America.
arena in Toronto.
America.
Okay.
America.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mark.
Sorry, Mark. we'll talk about Rush later. Okay.
No, but I'm saying that, but also they played multiple shows though as well with the reunion tour too. Don't forget, right?
Yeah, no, in a lot of places that is absolutely correct. They did do multiple night stands throughout, but in terms of, they were never a stadium band, and again, it just proved it all over. That it was Tiger Stadium and it was Dodger Stadium, so that was essentially it. And do fact check me if I'm wrong. I have no problem with being wrong either. Ken.
Yeah. While I don't want to, I'm going to agree with Lonnie. No,
I'm the voice of reason.
Lonnie made some good points. It's true that the band was on fire at that time, and they had those other great shows during the period, and they're really tight and were great during that period. So I think this would have been a great set list. I can only imagine, just thinking that, imagine if that did happen and they played these songs, and we can go back and listen to that show live. I'm sure it would have been awesome to just play over and over again, to either if it's on video or on audio or whatever, soundboard, whatever. It would have been great, and it would have been just a great show with all of these songs. So yeah, it would have been a cool thing had it happened.
I'm hoping that one of the from the soundboard releases is a show from this era that we don't already have from Kissology, because I agree with Lonnie as well. Lonnie, there you go. Everyone's agreeing with you today.
March 25th.
Mark it.
Yep. Remember it. Around this time, I think we get a taste of what's going to happen, and I think we're all wrong on the classics, because look back to the Foundation Forum or Blaze Fest at some of the rarities that were coming back into the set. I think they were getting a taste for it themselves anyway. Whether they were trotting them out at the time, just because they were, kind of non-standard events is one thing, but were they doing it for kicks, or were they doing it to see fan response? When you start throwing "Take Me Back" into the set, "King of the Nighttime World," "Got to Choose," "Rock Bottom." So I think we would have had great sets, and I think Carnival of Souls would have been token. So I think we still would have had those great set lists that we enjoy to this day. And every time we talk about them, we sing the praises of that era, 95, 94, those shows, this lineup, that band, every single one of those members of the band, even in 94, 95, after what was a pretty bad tour in terms of economics, and having to end it early and basically taking 1993 off, they were hot as shit. So I think if they'd put Carnival of Souls out at the time, it would have been a completely different album in some ways. I don't think it would be as slow and turgid as what they recorded at the end of 1995. I think it would have been a little bit more, happening, because they were happy within their own skin. So it would have been interesting anyway to see what happens. Let's move into the closing part of the set. And talk about how you would see the set. I've already mentioned again that I see them doing Rock and Roll All Night followed by nearly 8 songs, just like they'd done the previous tour. And some people hate that. They were going to bore you with encore after encore. How do you see them ending a Carnival of Souls tour set, and what are the important songs in that closing sequence for you? Lonnie, you've been right all day too long. Let's start with you.
We're talking about my wheelhouse era of the band, so I guess so. I went with them ending with I went with a more standard ending of a Kiss show, with them ending a set with Black Diamond, coming back and doing 3 of their more anthem and more recognizable songs, and coming back and doing Shout It Out Loud, Love Gun, and Rock and Roll All Night. More of a traditional end to a Kiss show. In the fact that a lot of people didn't like Rock and Roll All Night in the middle of the set list, and I think they would have went back to a more traditional way to end a Kiss show, and that's with Paul getting his moment with Black Diamond, and then Gene and Paul trading vocals with Shout It Out Loud, Love Gun, another Paul song, and then a Gene song with Rock and Roll All Night to end it with massive explosions, and we all know how a Kiss show ends. So I think it would have went back to that. I think it was kind of awkward. Rock and Roll All Night kind of shoved into the middle of the set, and I think they would have rectified that with ending it that way, more traditionally.
Nice, and I liked how you kind of approached your set. So, Mark, what about you? Agree? Disagree? How would you do it?
I totally agree. Because I know that when I got Alive 3, the fact that Rock and Roll All Night was in the middle and that whole introduction, we usually end the show with this one, and I was like, why are you putting it in the middle of this set? I don't understand. This whole "we're going along," bit was like a little odd, I found, just because it was such a known closer, it just seemed really odd. I mean, I closed the main set with Black Diamond. I thought that if you're going to close your main set, if you're not going to do it with Rock and Roll Night, you have to do it with that song at least. So I kind of closed it off with that. And I came back with the sort of typical set for the encore. If you're going to play Detroit Rock City, you're either doing it in 2 places. At the entry of the show at the very beginning, or the first song back on your encore. So I put that there. Then I put Let Me Go Rock and Roll. And then I put Rock and Roll Night second last, because I kind of saw them transitioning from a big ending on Rock and Roll Night. Paul smashes the guitar, and then while it's kind of all feeding back and stuff, they hand him another guitar and they do the Star Spangled Banner and Out on that. Because I kind of think that they were still feeling very proud to be American, So I think they would have kept that part of the show in there, at least for another tour. I mean, it's such a cool thing on guitar anyway, the way they did it. So, and that's another opportunity for them to blow off a lot more pyro. So that's kind of how I, placed it. A little bit of a tribute to the old and new with that.
Hoorah! And I just noticed that Lonnie did indeed have Shout It Out Loud, Black Diamond, Shout It Out Loud.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Video shoot.
I'm surprised you didn't notice that.
No, you skewed the results. You ruined it, man.
Yeah, no.
My credibility I gained today is out the window.
All right, Ken, how would you end this?
Yeah, well, first of all, how many of us saw that? I mean, I know I did. Saw the Rock and Roll All Night in the middle of the set. Any of us?
That's the revenge show. I got grounded.
Oh, yes. So it was just me?
I was in Scotland and I missed their visit.
Anyway, yeah, so I remember when that started, or when that song came on in the middle, and I was like, what It's like, are they ending the show, this early, after this,
What is this, Crazy Nights?
doing so many songs? And yeah, that's why I thought, as I was worried for a second there, because Crazy Nights was like, it was not good. So yeah, so then they continue. I thought, oh, that's just a weird thing to do. Weird thing to do. But anyway, I don't know why they did that, but they did it. So for me, I end on Rock and Roll All Night, and basically I don't make a big ending where there's a whole bunch of songs at the end. I do the original ending of the show, which is Black Diamond. That kind of ends it because that's their usual ending from the early days. And then they go off, they come back, do the Love Gun thing with Paul, and then end on Rock and Roll All Night and smash the guitar, and it's over. I don't think they didn't have to stretch
You do
out a
have
whole
Love
bunch
Gun
of
in
songs.
there, though.
I did put Love Gun in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Right in between, the Black Diamond ending. They go off, come back, and they kick into Love Gun, which is a great song to kick into at that point. And then it's finished on Rock and Roll All Night, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need to do a synchronized guitar smashing. Gene smashes a bass, Tommy smashes a guitar. They all synchronize. They haven't done that yet.
Well,
so.
they fight each other with their
still time.
guitars. They fight each other with their guitars.
All right, so I, of course, am different. So I kept Rock and Roll All Night. I think I mentioned this earlier. Back in that weird, we're going to tease you with 8 more encores, and they come back on, and they do Take It Off, Lick It Up, followed by Love It Loud, I Was Made for Loving You, I Stole Your Love. I don't know how well that would flow, thinking back. Detroit Rock City, Shout It Out Loud, then God Gave Rock and Roll to You to close, and then the curtains drop, and Paul then shouts out of the darkness, "Oh yeah, you thought we forgot this one," and ends the set with Love Gun.
He thought we forgot.
I think my set list is absolutely terrible, but looking at all 4 of these,
I don't know. You don't shout it out loud in there twice.
I don't know. There's, I do think there's plenty of issues to go around. All right, let's end with this. I listened to Carnival Souls, quite a bit to get ready for this, just to try and get back into the vibe. What struck me about it is, for my tastes and what I listen to these days, it has not aged well. I just don't find... I loved this album when it came out. I don't know whether it was because of what I went through to, get a copy when it leaked, and, the excitement and all that of a new album at that time. And, that was the first time I did any PR for a record label as well. So, there were happy memories around the time. And now I'm like, it's just... it's got a couple of really good songs. I really enjoy Hate to this day. I actually like that a lot more now than I did back in the day. But there's some stuff on there. Rain. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
There's got to be...
Real downer.
Yeah, there's got to be a pill for that. Master and Slave is still a really cool song. I Will Be There is still a really good song. Seduction of the Innocent and I Confess are good. But for the overall, it has not aged well. It doesn't sound good. The songs, just, it's half-assed. But I respect what they were trying to do. How has this album aged for you? And, what are your thoughts on it today, 2021? Lonnie.
When I got I got one bootleg. The first bootleg I got of it had didn't have all 12 songs on it. It might have had 8 songs on it. And then I'm super high on it. I love it. I think it's great. And then the second one I got on it had all 12 songs on it, and then had a couple it had a couple of demos and stuff like that at the end of it even too. And I was like, oh, more songs. And I loved it. I thought it was great at the time. And then it came out in October of 97, and I still loved it. I loved Hate, because I compared it to Unholy. It was the mirror song to me of Unholy. And I really liked Master and Slave. And I still like Hate. I still like Master and Slave. And I am going to agree with you, Julian. The album has not aged well for me. As much as I liked it in 1997, and I was hyping it up to my friends, like, "Oh, you guys have to listen to this. It's great." When I listen to it now, it just it doesn't hold a candle to Revenge for me. For the album that was advertised as we're gonna pick up where Revenge left off, I'm like, that's what I want to hear. It it doesn't. It doesn't pick up where Revenge left off. And as much as I do enjoy some songs off there to this day, there's a lot of filler and a lot of, you can tell they were mailing it in because they had other things on their mind. So it has a few good tracks on it, but it falls well short of my standards for a Kiss album.
I think one of the interesting things now that I consider is think of the magnographic demos prior to Destroyer and what Bob Ezrin did with that. I think if Bob Ezrin had come back to the producer chair for this album, it would have been a vastly different creature, one that we can barely envisage being such, or listen to some of the demos from Gene's Vault and how that was lost in translation as well by taking them from demo to studio recording. Ken, what are your thoughts on Cause today?
Yeah, I mean, like you guys said, I mean, I did like it when it first came out. I don't know if I really liked the idea of going grunge. I'm with Lonnie where they did say, I remember them saying, yeah, it was just going to be a continuation of Revenge, and it's like, well, this is not a continuation of Revenge, and then it's starting to sound like, grunge, and I was like, it's kind of weird, but I saw some of the songs were, pretty good, and then some of it was just, I don't expect to hear a bunch of downer songs from Kiss, Gene to a degree because the demon kind of thing, and but when Paul singing that kind of stuff, that just didn't work. It didn't work for me. So it that album fit Gene more than, or that style fit more Gene than Paul. Though Paul did have a couple of good songs on there, but yeah, I don't know if they phoned it in. I just think it was the wrong thing to do and the wrong producer for the album. And maybe, like you said, if Bob Ezrin was doing this one too, it would have been more upbeat. Probably half the songs would have been different, completely different.
Rewritten
orchestra. You have thrown some out. Yeah. So it's okay. It's good for a listen for certain songs I like on it, but then I don't listen to it that much.
Yeah, that's where the strength of Bob Ezrin comes into play, as an editor of ideas. And, Mark may not agree, and I'm sorry to bring Bob into this conversation, Mark, which, I decided I'll let Mark have the final word, and then I'll reveal our combined set list, which was put in order by me. So it's just the most popular songs chosen by all four of us into one 25-song set. So, Mark, your thoughts on Cause today?
You had to bring up Bob, didn't you? You had to bring him into this. It's not like there isn't any other record producers.
No, but if we want to trigger you, we all know which buttons to push.
That's true. I agree with a few points. I think number one, the record to me is too long. It's way too long a record. It's an hour, 17 seconds long. That is the longest album Kiss has ever made a studio record of, like, that length. So number one, you got to cut that down. I mean, we were complaining about how Hot in the Shade was a long record. This is a long record too. What did we always say about that record? It needs trimming. This needs trimming. Yes, somebody like a Bob Ezrin could have done the necessary things to make it better. I think Toby Wright is a decent producer, but he's the wrong producer for this band. Toby Wright is good for bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, and bands like that. And he did make multi-platinum records with Korn. Follow the Leader was done by Toby Wright, and it was a huge album. Toby Wright touched this, and it was not a big album at all. The problem is he was trying to get sounds of that ilk to a band that has nothing to do with that kind of a sound. You know, Paul Stanley's rhythm guitar doesn't sound anything like Monkeys or whatever the other guy's name is in Korn. So you don't, that's what I mean. It's the wrong guy. Yes, Bob Ezrin would have gave him a different sound, but you know what? There's other producers around that time that would have worked out well too. You know, like a Bob Rock, you know, Max Norman could have did it. Hey, if you're going to bring out somebody who's related to Kiss, why not bring out Eddie Kramer to do something? You know, he did Alive 3. Why not do a studio album proper with the guys again? I think that they did need a producer to tell them, guys, listen, this is ridiculous. Some of these lyrics, you know, no one's going to believe a band that has multi-million dollars, or maybe it doesn't have to be that much money, but guys who have a more than comfortable lifestyle will be complaining about anything like you guys are on these lyrics. Okay. So I think that they needed some guidance. Let's just use that word, to make this record believable. They could have made it heavy all they want. I mean, Revenge was a good record, you know, but that was more believable. I feel that a song like, you know, Take It Off is more a believable song to me than I Confess or, you know, In My Head. Like, come on, like, that's not Kiss, you know. So I think that the producer was desperately, desperately needed in this situation. And, you know, there was a lot of them out there that they could have used.
All right, so Mark had the final word on that. Sorry, Mark, for bringing up him. So our combined set, and again, I put this in order just for what I figure would have worked. Creases of the Night as the opener, followed by Detroit Rock City, Deuce, Master and Slave, Heaven's on Fire, Hate, Domino, Parasite, Take It Off, Firehouse, Jungle, Watching You, Lick It Up, I Love It Loud, War Machine, Tears Are Falling, which we really didn't say much about during this episode. I Confess, Forever, Shout It Out Loud, followed by Shout It Out Loud in honor of Lonnie, Rock and Roll All Night, I Still Your Love, Black Diamond, I Was Made for Loving You, Love Gun, and God Gave Rock and Roll to You. We're going to post our individual set lists that we picked in a graphic on the FAQ thread for this, and probably on Facebook as well. But you know what? If Kiss had toured for Carnival of Souls immediately, or, you know, after they'd done Kiss My Ass and Alive 3, you know, what do you think that they would perform from it? We've given some of our ideas. How do you think that would have changed the show, since there were those, you know, there was an evolution going on between Hot in the Shade to Revenge. What would have been the next step for this had they not interrupted their career, their artistic career or creative career, for easy money on a reunion? Mm-hmm. So that's what we've come up with. Those are our thoughts. Chime in with yours. But for now, for Mark, Lonnie, Ken, and myself, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the Kiss FAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. We hope that you enjoy.